Everybody's coming, and here comes our host, Randy Douglas. Woo woo. Wonderful. Wonderful. Hi, everybody.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good.
Hi, Patty.
How you doing?
Good.
We got some people coming in. We'll give it another minute or two if you don't mind. It just makes it so that we get fewer interruptions.
Whatever you say.
I got to tell you, guys are still in the market center. You must be exhausted. You don't stop.
Well, it's busy right now, so that's good, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's easier when it's busy.
Yeah.
How are you guys? All good?
Is everybody mostly new on this call?
How many are in the business less than 4 months? Just put up your hands. Okay. How many are less than 3 months? Oh my, okay. Anybody more than 6 months? Okay, Fatima, okay. Excellent. Kudos to you for getting on this. You know, this is the kind of class that I encourage you to listen to multiple times. It is being recorded and it will be on the BCP YouTube site. And it may also be on your market center sites.
Okay.
But it's the kind of class that you're going to want to listen to a couple times. And
Yep.
you're going to have the best of the best
Oh, boy.
telling
That's a
you
lot
what
of
to
pressure,
do.
Patty.
Boy,
I don't know.
no pressure there.
The best of the best teaching you. I have to tell you, Randy and Carolee, how many transactions do you do a year?
I don't know.
Depends how you count.
This year, I guess we're about 60.
Between 50 and 75, probably, Patty.
So they've written a few contracts. So you see what I mean when I tell you, they're going to tell you
I mean,
Just a few.
just a
if you
few.
go back, there's hundreds and thousands of contracts. We're in business.
Many
I
Your
don't know.
business a long time. Yep. So I have 3 after. Yeah. Good. We've got a nice group here. All right. Some of you may decide to mute yourselves if you've got background noise. And I'm going to start our screen share. You ready, guys?
Yeah.
Okay. I just have to find.
There we go. Whoop, Patty.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, you got the contract coming up?
It's coming.
Okay.
Yeah, give me a minute. I have to admit somebody. And where did it go? Okay, I'm going to pull it up before.
Have you guys, anybody in our group written a contract already? Or I recognize a couple of you guys from one of the classes maybe, but has anybody written one? Half of one?
Flirted with
Flirted
doing
one?
one?
Looked at
Oh.
one?
Please. Oh, and now that you say that, can you guys see the contract?
Yep, I do. Can you guys see it? I think Patty has to move that. You ready, Patty? Go ahead.
Yeah, I have to move it. So
Okay.
you go ahead and I'll move the contract as you speak to point out what.
Okay. The first page, guys, it does not say it, but we often start in saying something's in an error, but it used to say opinion 26. You guys might have learned at real estate school or heard, used to be called opinion 26. Basically says that we're not attorneys, but your client, your buyer or your seller's able to get an attorney themselves. So you're really just looking to check the boxes there in number 1, where it says I'm a real estate broker, I represent, and you pick who you represent. Now, sometimes you'll represent both people, which you guys are probably aware, it's called dual agency. So you would check the box there for that, which is both the seller and the buyer. Okay, those are the common ones. Later there's another box of neither the seller or the buyer. We hardly use that. That would be a transaction broker in New Jersey. And we hardly use that one. So really you're going to be going with either the seller, not the buyer, or the buyer, not the seller, or the dual agency one, which has both seller and the buyer.
So if you were explaining this to a buyer and going over the contract with him, I would basically just say, this is a notice to buyer and seller that says we're realtors representing whichever party we're representing, but we are not attorneys and you should get the advice of an attorney. So that's basically summarizes all of that print. When I go through a contract and explain it to a buyer or Randy, we don't go through every line. We tell them generally what's on the page. You'll occasionally get an engineer, somebody who's very detailed, which will want to cover every line. So you should read it and at least understand it. If you don't understand it, ask somebody or do some research, just so they're not asking you questions and you have no idea what they're talking about.
This page 1, guys, is basically a disclosure form saying that we're not attorneys. We suggest that they get an attorney. And then you can see where Patty scrolled down to nicely. It calls for the buyer to sign. So if something you're writing the contract for your buyer, because if you're representing the seller, another person's going to write that. But your buyer would sign here in both places, and you prepare the contract, you'd put your name on the bottom section there. And now on the
If you represent the buyer, you're gonna be the selling broker, obviously. If you represent the seller, you'll be the listing broker. If you represent both, you'll sign in both places, and then put prepared by yourself, or if you have somebody who's helping you with the paperwork, that's who would prepare it.
so
Now, I think what's confusing for people, because it says selling broker,
I
and
know.
we've got some people who are, most are sales associates, not brokers. And selling sounds like sellers.
that page, I don't
I
think
know.
Patty calls for, I've had some people send it to me for my signature as a broker, but I think they want Keller Williams Valley Realty's name there and Coldwell Banker, for example, on the other side. So
Okay.
it's, no?
We always sign it.
Oh, well, you can sign, well, then it'd be Carolee
yeah.
Jericho, or it would be Danielle or Yusuf or whoever's Escobar, whoever's doing this, you'd sign there where Patty's running the cursor right now.
But Patty's right, it's confusing because selling broker might sound like you're for the seller, representing the seller. But the person who's representing the seller is the listing broker or
Yeah.
listing agent.
But
So
you
it's
do
not-
need to sign prepared by whom?
Yeah, whoever prepares it. Usually it's yourself.
Probably you guys are newer, you're probably going to be preparing it yourself. Okay, so we'll get, if anybody has any questions during the process here, you guys can just put up your hand or let Patty know you have a question. But page 2 and page 3 are really where the documentation starts more intensely, guys. That's where most of your writing, you guys probably remember from the experience you've had over the last couple months or real estate school, that we're not allowed to write contracts in New Jersey. We're allowed to fill in the blanks. So we're going to fill in the blanks on this page Patty has up here now, and the next page. That's most of the pages where your writing is. And it's mostly, to make it simple, kind of like your name, rank, and serial number, I like to say. It's pretty much your name, the buyer's name, the buyer's address, seller's
But
name,
don't
seller's
go yet.
address. Go ahead, Patty.
But Patty, just scroll back up a little bit. I just want to point something out. That very first line under where it says New Jersey Realtor said this is a legally binding contract, which will become final after attorney review. Because you'll often get a buyer say, should I sign this without my attorney looking at it? It is customary that buyers and sellers sign the contract as long as we agree on the terms, and then it goes to the attorney for a 3-day review, during which time the buyer or seller, frankly, can back out for any reason or no reason at all. So it is a binding contract, but it doesn't become final until the 3-day attorney review period is over. And I mention that only because you may get a buyer say, oh, I don't know, this looks very
Good point.
legal and formal. Should I sign it? And then always go to that line to point it out to them, that everything they sign is subject to their attorney's review within the first 3 days. Okay. I
That
just
makes
want-
sense, guys. Okay, Patty, we can kind of move down there. So
Yeah,
there's
we've got the
blank
table
spot.
of contents,
Right.
Yeah,
and you can
So
see I poached this from someone else, so disregard the buyer's name.
that's okay. That's okay, Patty. Yes, I see buyers and sellers name and address, guys. So it's pretty self-explanatory. Like Carolee said, if you read this ahead of time in advance, when you go to make this out, you won't feel like quite as nervous or stressed when you start filling it out.
And there's separate boxes, so it would be John buyer and Mary buyer in the other box, then their current home address. And then you come down, the same thing for the seller. Sometimes on the listing, it will say, it won't have the seller's name. It'll be in care of listing broker. If you look in the tax records, you can generally get the name to put on it. And if they live at the property address, then you're going to put in their address. If you don't know, if the house is vacant, you don't know where the sellers live, you can leave that address blank, or you can ask the other agent. And then it comes down to property address. So that would be 123 Tice Boulevard in the municipality of Woodcliff Lake, County of Bergen. The lot and block you get right off the listing paperwork. And then, what does that say?
A property qualifier, if the
Qualifier,
property is a
yeah.
condominium.
Oh, okay, yes, if it's a certain,
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be in the tax records, guys. The most important thing, Carol, you mentioned, Patty, is the lot and block number. So you'll find that right if you're looking at the New Jersey MLS, it's right in the top near the address, just underneath the address. So you can find that very, very easily. And if you can't find
And-
something while you're trying to make this out, of course, call somebody for some help or give Patty or ourselves a call.
To that point, it's always such a good idea to have at least two windows open, command with the contract and the MLS. And I see Fatima has her hand up.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that. Usually if you fill this out on command, most of the stuff is gonna auto-populate. That's how I do it.
yeah.
Yes, if you've entered them as an opportunity in there, it's
Do you
gonna,
do it in
Yes.
DocuSign?
Yeah, I do it through the command, and then you press on opportunity, and then you go to
Yep.
transaction. It takes you to
Right.
DocuSign.
You're right.
Yep.
If you know how to do command and you enter all the accurate information about your buyer, their address, that will auto-populate into the document.
Yep, in fact, if your starting point is the contact and then click opportunities there, it makes it smoother.
if
Okay.
you have to write this contract tomorrow, guys, and you're not a command expert, Patty and I just had a meeting for an hour or so today about some other things, but you could print this contract out and fill it in with a pen and have the people hand sign it. Of course, electronic signing is popular and done to save, make things quick and easy and convenient. But you can always print it out and take a pen and fill the same document stuff in that Fatima is saying she auto-filled in, which is just a convenience of the computer skills. So if your computer skills are basic or command knowledge is basic.
Or DocuSign is
don't worry about
down. Don't worry, you can handwrite it.
Yep. Fatima, is that all the question you had? If so, I'm going to ask you to lower your hand so I don't come back to harass you.
Yeah, that was it. I'm sorry. Okay, you got it.
Unless you
No,
have another
thank you,
question.
Fatima. Okay. All right, now we come to the fun part, the mathematics.
Any other questions so far, guys? Okay. The first line under new purchase price. I mean, we all should know the purchase price our buyer wants to offer. So maybe Carol Lee wants to tell you how to set that up. But obviously, if they say, wow, we love this house, we want to offer 500, you're going to fill in the 500 unless the house is 800 and you know they're not going to get it. That's another strategy thing. Sometimes in these meetings, we end up talking quite a bit about sales strategy, but maybe Carol Lee wants to talk about that. So the first line there is purchase price. It's going to be whatever your offering price is.
Well, first, before you write a contract, obviously you should always speak to the listing agent, especially in this market, because you don't want to go through all this, write a contract and find out, like say, write a contract for 500, only to find out that they turned down 5.25 yesterday. So you want to be strategic about it and be able to advise your buyer, especially in a competitive market. So if you have somebody that you've shown a house to and they've expressed interest and said, we think we want to make an offer on this property, they often will say, what do you think is the right price? And we are not really supposed to advise them of that. But what we might say to them is, I'll send you some comps to give you some idea. And I'll speak to the listing agent just to get a feel for how, because obviously if there's 2 or 3 offers, you're probably not coming in 30,000 lower than the asking price. So you would always want to call the listing broker, find out, A, is it available? Are there any offers on it? Are there recent offers that the seller has turned down? They won't always tell you the dollar amount, but if somebody tells you, if the house has been on the market 3 days and you've called the listing agent and they say, I have 3 offers on it, well, chances are you probably have to at least be at full price to even be in the running. if they're going to do like a final and best. So you do want to have a conversation with the listing agent. You also would like to know what would be the ideal closing for the seller, because remember, you're trying to make an offer that's going to appeal to the seller. So you want to find out what is their situation. Do they want a quick closing? Do they want a longer closing? You know, all of those kind of things are important.
Are most of you guys already out showing properties? I know Danielle's shown quite a few properties. I just kind of give Patty a little nod there or raise your hand. If you've been out showing, if you haven't been showing properties yet, of course, this may sound like confusing, the sales strategy of it, but a lot of you guys showing properties already and working with clients?
Sanja raised her hand.
Okay, all right. So when you get to the point that you are, Carolee's giving you a very good strategy. Talk to the listing agent. It's always good to build that rapport. You'll see when you get some experience under your belt, the more knowledge you can gain from the listing agent, and the more you polish your reputation by, you know, working with these other people. It'll be very, very helpful for you to glean some information that may help you get your offer accepted, because in today's market, there's lots of competition. So you want to know as much as you can about that property and your buyer and the other agent and what's going on before you complete this document. Because if it's already had offers and you're offering 500, like Carolee said, they already had 525 yesterday, they turned down, you might be wasting an hour or more of your time figuring out how to write the contract. Your buyer's excited, and maybe an hour or two later, you figure out I'm presenting the offer, but really it was a moot point because they already turned something way better down yesterday. So
Okay, so for the convenience of math, shall we say,
That's why we're using 500.
okay, exactly. So total purchase price of 500.
Here, so you know, our word is always like a carpenter: measure twice or three times and cut once. So
That's
we
right.
always double, triple, quadruple check ourselves, because when you get excited about writing an offer, guys, it's very common, like, to make a mistake. So double, triple checking makes your numbers look right at the end, and you look more professional.
So we'll.
And how much are they putting down? What percentage?
Right, well, we'll talk about the standard. So the standard for conventional loan is 20% down.
20%.
Now, we can get mortgages as low as 3.5% down, you know, then 5, 10%, 15%, all of those things. But what people like to use as the standard is 20%. So if your people are putting 20% down on a $500,000 house.
Yeah, but you're going to put your deposit.
Yeah, wait, I'm going to tell
Okay.
you.
Okay. Sorry.
That would be $100,000.
100,000.
Even I can do that now. That would be $100,000, because 10% would be 50, and 10%, the other 10% would be 50. So it's a total of 100. We don't take an initial deposit anymore. We used to take $1,000 up front for that initial deposit line. Now we leave that blank. The first thing we fill in is additional deposit. So it's standard that 5 or 10 days after attorney review, the person would put down 10%. So you would put $50,000 under additional deposit. And you'll see on the next page, it talks about when, but for now, you're just going to fill that in. So if they're putting a total of 20 down and they put 10% in 10 days, then the balance they would be putting down would be at the closing. So Patty put balance of purchase price at the closing. So
And our mortgage amount is?
So the mortgage amount, if they've already put down 50 and they're putting down another 50, that's a total of 100. The mortgage amount is 400.
So in this case, we are
Oh, yeah.
depositing only 10%, right?
They're putting 10% up front, but they're putting a total of 20 down on the contract.
The new agents, sometimes they're confused and they think that the whole deposit has to be given upfront. And although that could be a strategy, or it could be the case if it's a low deposit.
Right.
Carolee, do you want to speak? Let's say somebody's
Yeah.
only putting down 5%.
If you're only putting 3.5% down, then that entire 3.5% would be put down in the additional deposit category. And the last line at closing would be 0, because that's the total they're putting down. But if somebody's putting down, even if somebody's putting down 10% on the contract, that 10% again would be an additional deposit. The reason being that you have some skin in the game, you're putting money up. Not that you're ever going to lose it, because it's subject to an inspection and a mortgage, but it shows good faith. And the seller is not going to want to take their house off the market when you don't have any money put up. So that deposit is generally, as I said, 10 days after attorney review. It can be shorter if you're competing, but we're talking about like a standard deal with. that you're not
Standard, yeah.
competing.
Are
You
we
have
up
to learn the usual
First of
before you
all,
go
guys-
crazy. I'm sorry, Randy.
So it's mostly like a strategy, right?
Freddie?
Well, this
Yeah.
is not. This is the
Well,
standard.
The strategy might be, Freddie, we're giving you that's a very good question, because in this kind of market, you guys probably all are aware that the market's super competitive right now because interest rates are low, inventory's low. It's making often on primo properties, multiple offers. So this would be a traditional presentation, 10% down. Carolee mentioned that money would usually come in within maybe 5 to 7 days after attorney review. That's the traditional. The strategy might be, if you guys are writing an offer tonight and you told Carolee there were 3 offers ready, highest and best is due tomorrow by 5 o'clock, we might tell you, have them bring in the money maybe tonight and write you a check, or have them come in the day after attorney review, make it quicker. It's kind of like a lot like sports guys, timing. As they say, timing in life is critical. So the faster things happen, the better off and stronger your contract will be, just like any sports, any football. The faster things happen. So if your money comes in faster, if your closing meets exactly what you've already asked the other agent about, if your mortgage commitment is in a shorter term than another party, now you're competing against other people that you might be able to beat out. Okay.
But this is pretty much standard. Let's say
This is
that we don't have
standard.
any other anything we're competing against. This would be a standard contract. What you need to know to write the contract when you're talking to, if a buyer says, we think we want to make an offer on this house, what you need to know is what the amount of the offer is, their full legal names, and their current address, if you don't already know that. You need to know what is the total amount they're putting down. So in this case, the total amount they're putting down is 20%. And then you break it up 10% and 10% at closing. But
And
if
the
they-
pre-approval, sorry, Carolee,
Right. And the last
pre-approval.
thing you need is a pre-approval from their mortgage company or from a bank. And we recommend people, we give them names of our mortgage people that we like to use. But one way or another, you have to have a pre-approval letter before you present the offer. And
Yeah.
if you have a pre-approval letter up front, you'll already have maybe their legal names, their address, and some of that information.
And the type of loan, okay.
We like to sell houses with nice round numbers, makes this math simple. Just kidding.
Yeah.
So-
Sandra has her hand up.
Sandra, go ahead.
Hi, sorry. So I was wondering, so right now my clients are looking for a house. We just got the offer accepted after, this was our 8th offer.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so they're first time home buyers. They're doing conventional to be able to even compete and be in the game, and they're putting only 5% down. The house that we were looking at was 410, and they after failing, they decided to put 40 over and 5% down. What do you suggest? I mean, we broke it up into 10,000. The whole 5% is 22,500. We broke it into 10 additional and 12,500 as a balance. But what do you recommend when
But
it's
you
a
already-
low?
But you already
You
have the
already have
deal
it accepted,
accepted.
right?
Yeah, it's accepted, but because
long
Then
as-
don't touch it.
As long as the seller that was acceptable to seller. Some attorneys are really hung up about the 10% down in your, or as close to it as possible. Other attorneys will say, as long as it's a substantial down payment that the people are not going to walk away from, you can't do it with 2,000 down. But if they have 10,000 down or 15, in that case, since you were competing, I might have put it all down up front, just because when you have a 5% buyer and you might be competing with 10% down, 15% down, 20% down buyers, it makes you look stronger if your money's up front.
Are you out of
Yeah.
attorney review, Sandra, or? still in?
no, we just started. The point was it wasn't even, from what I understood, it wasn't even about the money and the deposit. It was about waiving inspections and appraisal,
We'll
which,
get to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, well, you did
Okay.
a lot of.
Well,
hold
a
on.
lot of good things there, securing the house for your people. That's the most important.
And
thing.
you know what, also, you must they must trust you and like you, because they lost many houses, and many times what happens is buyers start to blame the realtor. And so you must be doing a good job with them for them to stick with you.
Good.
Not that
Kudos.
not that any of it's your fault,
Kudos.
but I'm just saying, many times, I just had a customer referred to me and they said, we've lost so many houses. They start to lose faith in their realtor. So you must be doing a very good job with them.
it was very scary for me too, because they are my close friends, and they know that that I'm new to the game too. I mean, licensed for 4 years, but I've been doing it on and off because I have a full-time job. So I'm learning. I just, wish I could do more time. So that's why I mean, I didn't want to do wrong by them, so
And the only thing I would say to you is that, and then maybe you talk to Patty or whatever, if that happens to any of you, because you don't want people to feel like, oh, well, she's new and maybe she's not doing the best job, don't hesitate to ask for help. Patty's been in the business forever. We've been in a long time. We might know the listing agent, or we might be able to say to you, gee, put more money down, do this, like we.
Yeah,
so
we'll help
don't
you with the strategies.
Yeah, don't hesitate, anybody, not just Sandra, because obviously you made a deal, so that's great.
Sanjay, now your key thing at the moment would be, if you didn't already discuss with somebody like Patty, would be to make sure your clients get in and out of attorney review as quickly as possible. Hopefully they have a good real estate attorney, maybe that you even suggested. But even if you don't know the attorney, or they don't really know the attorney well, they should ask the attorney, tell them that, hey, we really want this property. We need to get in and out of review. Now, today is Tuesday. If it was my deal or Carol's, we kind of probably want to get out of review in the next couple of days before Friday night.
Before the weekend.
So it doesn't go over the weekend, because while you're in attorney review, you probably know one of the other disappointed parties could try to offer more money or better terms, and I'll try to bump you out in attorney review. So you want to get in and out of review as quickly as possible, even if they have to call their attorney and tell them, look, we've lost other houses. We want to get out of review, Mr. or Miss Attorney, as quickly as possible. So I think that's what we'd suggest. That's your next key step.
And I'm we're gonna have to move along. We're halfway through, and we're only done
Thank
2
you, guys.
pages.
I hope that's helpful.
Well, these are the
Okay.
most
Yes.
important pages, then we'll fly through the rest.
Okay,
Okay.
all right, initial deposit.
So that, we don't do an initial deposit, so that paragraph, whatever that
That would
number
be
is.
0. Line 53 would be,
We leave
it's
it
not
blank.
going to be held, so you can leave it blank. We're going to go down to paragraph B on line 56, guys. That's on the prior page. That's where Patty filled in $50,000 as your, in this case, 10% deposit.
Additional, yeah.
So it's going to be your deposit money, but it's in this real estate terms now, it's called additional deposit. So it's going to be in there. The money's going to be due
You want to
as
type in
quickly as
there,
possible.
if it's a normal contract, maybe 7 days from attorney review. Or you could put an actual date, but something not too, you don't want it to extend too
Yeah,
long.
let's put a date. The attorneys are gonna change that, but at least everybody's working from a
So today
concrete.
is the 19th. You might allow a couple days for attorney review. So that's the 20th. You might want to pick a date like the 26th or something like that.
Again, guys, the strategy.
And the attorneys will change it. So it's not so
Yeah.
important.
I would
Yeah,
try to
don't
make
get
it
crazy
short
about
as
it.
possible though, for strategy, like in Sonia's case, or when you're competing with other people, make that money, because we have offers submitted to us on our listings. The agents put in, oh, the money's due in 2 weeks. Well, 2 weeks in real estate terms is a lifetime. They could have 50 more offers if it's a hot property. So we would not like, if somebody offered on our listing and we want our owner to take it, we would say, look, your offer's great, but when you bring in the money, we can't wait 2 weeks. So it has to be a lot quicker. So a couple days after attorney review or something really tight time frame will really help you make deals.
And the
It
next
does
paragraph-
say if left blank, then 10 calendar days, not business days, calendar days
Right.
after the fully signed contract has been delivered to both the buyer and the seller.
I would suggest never leave it blank for that purpose.
Okay, that's a long time. And then the next blank is to be held in the trust account of, and it's always the seller's attorney. And when I say, customarily, it's the seller's attorney. Occasionally, the seller's attorney will say to the buyer's attorney, you can hold it, but generally it's the seller's attorney.
All
Then
right,
we
guys,
go,
so we're all with that here so far?
then we go down to just a whole paragraph that says this whole contract is subject to the buyers getting a mortgage. So you would fill in the principal amount. In this case, it would be $400, the amount of the mortgage. If it's a
400,000.
What'd I say?
$400.
400.
Yeah, that'd be good. That'd be easy. I'll give them a mortgage. $400,000. Then you have to check, that would be, in this case, 20% down would be a conventional loan. If it was FHA, you check FHA, obviously. The term of the mortgage, let's assume that it's a straight 30-year mortgage. And that's based on a 30-year payout. Because there are things like balloon mortgages, adjustable rate more, but we won't get into that.
That's
right now.
almost, you're almost always gonna write 30, 30 in there, guys.
Yep.
That's pretty
Yep.
standard. Then the next line
Is
is
when we're gonna get our mortgage
commitment. And normally, if you speak to most lenders, they'll tell you you need 30 days to get a mortgage commitment. So if today is October 19th, we might want to make that, I'd have to look at the calendar, but September, 20th or 22nd or something like that.
Well,
Allow
30 days from now.
Yeah.
Would be 11.
19.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going
11,
backwards.
19.
I'm going backwards from October to September.
Yeah,
That'd be
11. Yeah,
Right.
Okay.
So about approximately 30 days from when you write. Again, they'll adjust this in attorney
Yep.
review, but you don't want to make it 60 days because the seller will say, why is it going to take that long to get a mortgage?
that's right. They'll wonder if there's any issues.
Even though sometimes they do.
So those are where the numbers come into play, guys, about your offer and the money due. Are you guys all kind of on the same page with that so far? Any questions? Don't be shy.
And then balance of the purchase price, that just says that they're going to bring the additional funds to closing, and it says on or about, I believe it says, which is
Yeah.
the closing date. And an average closing date is 60 days. 30 days to get the mortgage, then time to do the title work. And then it can be done in 45, it could be 90, but the average is 60.
So
Unless
what's
you-
60 days from today?
From December
December
19th.
December, yeah.
December 19th.
So
which is
we
Sunday.
see that that's a Sunday. That ain't
So
gonna
we make it the
happen.
20th.
Yeah.
Or the 17th, you know.
If you make a mistake on timing and the contract happens to be a Sunday, obviously it'll be changed and it'll be all worked out in attorney review.
And just something I want to mention to you, make sure when you do this, that you explain to the buyer that and the seller that that date is a target date. It's not written in stone. Don't go book your mover because we've had people do that. Don't book your mover and count on that particular day because it depends on the attorney's schedules. It depends on, so it's a target date on or around that date. And when you get closer, then the attorneys really ultimately set the date.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
things that we're doing so far, guys, that Patty's filling in, we're assuming we're making our offer now with our buyer. So this would be our proposal to the seller. So of course, if the seller agrees to it, there's no changes. But if the seller got back to Patty and said, oh, we can't close on December 20th. We really want to close on December 10th because we're closing on a condo in Pennsylvania on the December 10th. And we really like, so then that's part of your negotiation that you want to meet when you're competing. Of course, you want to meet the seller's expectations here. So you might find that if they want a little more money, in this case, we offered 500. If they want 510 and they want to close a week sooner or a week later, they don't want to close the week of the holidays around Christmas and New Year's. They want to close January 2nd. That's all part of your negotiation that you have. All right.
And then the next paragraph just says that the buyer represents that they have sufficient funds to close, that there's accurate disclosure of the selling price. And then the next thing is items included in the sale. And the
But I
buyer-
just, one thing, if you are going for a fast closing, please make sure there's at least 10 days between the mortgage contingency date and closing so that title work can be done. Okay,
Good point, Patty. And then items included in the sale, many times on the listing, you'll see items included. So I know attorneys don't like when we put per listing. So if it says washer, dryer, refrigerator, copy those onto the contract. And then items excluded, sometimes they're written there. Now, if nothing is written on the listing, then if the buyers would like the washer, dryer and the window treatments, you could write it in because again, this is an offer. The seller will come back and either say, like they might come back to this offer and say, well, we want 5 1/4. We want the closing date to be December 10th, and we're not leaving our washer and dryer. So this is a negotiation right now when one side is making the offer.
yeah, items excluded was the dining room chandelier.
Okay. Yeah. And just make sure if it says it on the contract that you put it in, because sometimes the attorneys miss it and then everybody's screaming, like you said, it was staying, didn't we have a thing like
Yeah.
that? You know, so
Happens all the time.
just try to be careful. with that.
Also, look at the seller disclosure form, because there's, I think it's on the second page, where it talks about appliances that are going to stay. Just make sure it's a match, that there isn't a discrepancy.
Once on a blue moon, guys, you see somebody goes to the walkthrough, which takes place
Yeah.
basically the day before, the day of the closing. And your buyer goes in, the house is vacant, and they say, oh my God, where's the refrigerator? And the mover, either the owner or the mover made a mistake and took the refrigerator, and the owner's now in Pennsylvania and no movers are in sight. And of course, your buyer's upset because refrigerators nowadays are more expensive, and I understand with current inflation, it went way up more. So if it costs $2,000 for that refrigerator, they're going to say, well, what the heck? Now we don't have a fridge. So it's going to create a problem a couple hours later at your walkthrough. So the more you can handle that stuff up front, by like Carol Lee said, make sure the owner and the buyers understand clearly what's included and not included. Make life a lot easier.
And to take the onus off you a little bit, I think you should just tell your sellers and buyers, because a lot of them don't, read the rider from your attorney and make sure that everything in it is accurate. Because a lot of times people just sign it.
To a little aside, if there is a major item included, a really expensive Persian rug or a boat, if it's lake property, that should not go in the contract. That would be a separate agreement, because mortgage companies don't like to see that.
That's right. You should do a side agreement with the buyer and the seller.
It's not illegal. It's just being cautious.
Review, guys, so don't worry about you doing it at the moment.
I just had a person who bought something and she said, I want it furnished. And I go, but we're not going to say furnished in the contract, because then, as you can imagine, the appraiser comes out and he says, well, what's the value of the furniture? What's the value? It's complicated. So
Yeah, don't
we
go
made a
there.
separate agreement with the buyer and the seller for some furniture.
And lenders don't want to finance the fancy boat that's out in Greenwood Lake or the furniture,
Exactly.
because it's not going to last 30 years like the house will. The furniture in the boat could sink or catch fire next week. So all is good. That's another reason they don't do
The
it.
next blank is about certificate of occupancy. The seller is responsible to provide a certificate of occupancy, which is something the town issues in order for them to sell. So sometimes they need to have repairs and things done, like a railing put on the steps or whatever that the town requires. So this is just basically saying that they're not going to exceed. Some people put actual cost. We sometimes put $1,000. The truth of the matter is, if they want to sell their house, they have to get a CCO. So even if it costs $4,000, they probably do it. But we usually put $1,000. The attorneys will adjust that.
How we doing? Any questions so far, guys? Because this is kind of as we get into, we're only on page 4, and there's 13 pages. So this gets into the real dry stuff of the contract. That's like really the minutia. However, it's a contract, so we'll go over it. But if you have any questions, just raise your hand or tell Patty, and we'll try to go over it pretty, I think, quickly here. I hate to even say that, but we'll go over it. We did the important stuff, the money page.
Municipal.
The other important is down in the back with the contract and the real estate license.
So municipal assessments, just you should be aware if there are. Usually that's with a condo. There's open assessments, and you should know that from the listing.
The listing will say.
Paragraph 11, they have to deliver a clear title to your buyer, or if you're representing a seller, in this case, you'll see the seller has to do clear title, or they're not going to be able to put a loan on the property. Down below here, we have possession and tenants.
Wait, Patty just filled in the blank. You see where that is? Most times it's going to be single family house.
Or one family.
If it's a condo, it should say condo. If it's a 2-family, it should say, you're just telling the type of property it is, so that you're not representing.
You have to understand, guys, that most lenders, other than the appraiser and attorneys, they never see the property. So they're totally going by the description that they come see on their desk. That's a 1-family property or a multifamily.
Yeah.
If it's a multifamily, that may kick in on line 195. The attorney is going to say, well, are there tenants? And then if there's tenants, what are the leases and what's the rent? And if you don't already know that, the other realtor didn't put it in the listing agreement, you then have to ask questions, because if there's a tenant there, the tenants have the lease goes with the property. You may remember from real estate school, meaning the tenant will not be, you can't throw them out. They will not be moving unless they've agreed with the landlord to move. They will not be moving out. They come with the property.
But the majority of the time, you're gonna check what Patty did, not applicable, because you're gonna be selling single-family houses, and most of them don't have tenants in them.
And
So
to your
then
point, make sure the attorney has a copy of the MLS printout.
Yes, they like to have that. And then the lead-based paint, any house built before 1978 has lead-based paint at some level. And so that would be applicable, the lead paint disclosure. Anything built after 78, it's not applicable. So that's the choices there. And you'll know the age from the listing.
There is a separate lead paint document, guys, that you guys probably know that you have to have signed by all parties.
Okay.
All right?
Then,
So-
then the next part is all about inspections. Every kind of inspection, termite inspection, home inspection. We always do radon now. We always suggest an oil tank sweep, all those types of inspections.
I don't think we'll drag over that, guys, but the contract is subject to the mortgage. Subject, first off, to attorney review, the mortgage. Usually you're gonna have a home inspection, although I think Sanjay just said they waived the inspection. So you may have that in the competitive market where the buyer understands. So there's some other documentation that go with that, but typically the contract's conditional upon those things. And we're not gonna go over all these inspection issues, because I think, like Patty said, back in the document farther, there's some more important ones, but these are all the.
But you have to read it. Yeah, you have to read
If you
this.
wanna read it, we can, but
It basically says the buyer has the right at their own expense to do whatever inspections they want to do within a certain time period. Again, you want to tighten that
10
up.
days.
Yeah, 10 days. You don't want it to be 14. If it's a competitive market, you might want it to be 7.
we've even had people do the inspection the next day, Sanja, so like, because now we promised the other realtor will come back tomorrow or Saturday rather than a week or two. And that's another strategy thing. So it's not the traditional, but it's a strategy. So just keep that in mind, guys.
Yeah, I mean, any of these things can be different, but this is the standard. So they have the right to do the inspection. And what that clause says is they have the right to ask the owner to correct things that are broken or repair things. And the seller has the right to say no or to fix them.
The common question, guys, is by homeowner is, Carol Lee, I thought I was selling the house as is. It does say in here that the house is as is. However, it also says it's subject to giving the buyer the right to have inspections, and the buyer can ask for any deficiencies in the house to be fixed. But I shouldn't really even word it that way. Any deficiencies, it's a huge long list. It's usually a little tiny narrow list of things that an owner might consider doing, some kind of structural or environmental or safety issue that maybe nobody knew about before. So this is all subject to all these inspections, and then it's open to negotiation. And Patty can tell you that these home inspection issues can be super time consuming for us as realtors. And it's just part of what we have to do.
And if you're gonna, I always tell people, if a deal's gonna fall through, it's probably gonna be because of, it's gonna fall through, it would probably be the inspection, not so much the mortgage, because we get pre-approvals that are pretty solid today. So the inspection is where, you know, if people get their back up and they can't agree, most times it does not. But if you're gonna have a problem, once you're past home inspection, you feel pretty good about your deal. So what we do now to compete is we might put purchaser agrees to do home inspection for structural, environmental, and safety only.
Okay, I'm just gonna,
That makes sense, guys. In other words, the owner's not going to want a laundry list of these 35 items that the inspector
go.
finds in his 80-page report. They may do a few things. The homeowner's going to say, Carol Lee, my house is as is. I don't want to do 35 things. So you may have to boil it down and get the owner on the same page, that maybe you have to fix a couple safety things like a hand railing or a leak in the roof. If the inspector finds an active leak in the attic the owner didn't know about, stuff like that, guys. So it's really, you have to really watch this. Like Carol Lee said, things can fall through over an inspection when people get their back up.
And you can help yourself a lot by, if you're representing the buyer, explain to them that you're having an because I've heard buyers, they'll say to you, well, when we have the inspection, we'll see what happens with the price. And because they go in thinking they're going to get money back. So it's a good thing to prepare them to say the inspection is for things that you can't see. In other words, the driveway's cracked, you can see that. You can't come back and say the driveway's cracked. The seller's disclosure said the roof is 20 years old. Unless it's leaking, you can't come back and say it's old. You knew these things when you made an offer. It's for things like there's a leak under the sink and we can't see that. That's legit. Or there's asbestos on the pipes and you're not an expert at the asbestos, so you didn't know that. You know, those are the kind of things. Not that the windows are old, because I often say to people, if they didn't replace the windows for themselves, they're not doing it for you.
Are you going backwards?
You know, they're not buying.
Yeah, I
you.
just wanted to put in that phrase under additional contractual provisions.
So that's, the inspection process goes back and forth a little bit.
But guys, those real life things that Carol Lee's citing, guys, an active leak in the roof, or the driveway's cracked, or the roof is, the owner said the roof is 20 years old, it's a 30-year-old shingle, meaning they last 30 years. Lots of buyers right now in a competitive market where they offer 20, 30, 5,000, 50,000 over the asking price, feel in their own way that gives them the opportunity to claw back some of the money that they just overpaid, because they go home and sleep at night and think, oh my God, maybe we overpaid for this, but you know, we'll beat the owner up in the home inspection, get a new driveway, get a new roof, get a new furnace, we'll be all set. And then the owner gets really bummed out and says, you know, this furnace has been supporting me here for 40 years. It's not leaking. It heats the house fine. And I'm not giving the buyer a new furnace the week before I move out. So it becomes a problem. So you want to always, like Carol Lee said, set the stage with your buyer. They're not going to get the world. And if you're representing the owner, when you reverse this and get a listing, your owner has to understand that there may be some questions by the buyer when they get their 85-page inspection report from the inspector that was there Saturday for 5 hours. So it's a balancing act between keeping everybody happy.
And you're
Did
there.
I go too fast? Did I skip over something that you wanted to?
No.
No, well, maintenance of the property just means that the homeowner is required to keep the property in the same condition. You can't let the grass grow 10 feet high. You need to maintain that property in the same condition up until the closing. Risk of loss talks about if there's a fire to the house. And, I mean, you can read all these. They're pretty, the final walkthrough. So every buyer is entitled to do a walkthrough prior to closing. So the night before or the morning of, you do a walkthrough at the house. And all you're looking for is if there were repairs that were promised that they were done and that everything is in the condition that it was when you bought it. Like nobody broke it when the movers didn't put a hole in the
Could someone please mute themselves?
قتلتوا للبي وين شفتوه؟
That's okay.
That's okay. I
Mama-
thought you had a question.
That's okay.
But
طوني
you just want to make sure that the house is
Could
in-
somebody mute themselves,
قراتك ما
please?
حلوين ما راح اعمل عيد
I think
ميلاد.
it's Susan.
I cancel. This is will not go on the picture. Yes. You have to take shower.
Okay, I will
Could
take it.
someone please mute themselves?
After the class.
We're not taking a shower.
We all need a shower.
Could someone please?
So I hope this is helpful so far, guys. I don't know, Patty said the class is an hour. We can go over a little bit if you want to.
Yeah, I stopped
I
sharing
think we
because
lost the
of the
contract,
issue.
Patty.
Oh.
All right,
Are we
I'm
back to sharing?
There we go.
sharing is-
So then you're entitled to the initial walkthrough. If there's a problem, the attorneys to work it out at closing with an escrow or with credit or something. But most times at that point, everybody's happy and that's what we hope to have.
Okay.
You
want to go ahead, Patty, to the page where the broker information is?
Sure.
okay.
Yeah.
Here we go. All right, guys, on line, paragraph 29, you're gonna say what your broker relationship is. You probably remember from real estate school or some experience that you've had. You want to put the name of your company and
The
what
first part is
relationship
for the buyer's broker, which is the selling agent.
Then on line 550, we're gonna check off the
Now we're
buyer's
gonna-
agent.
Yeah,
You want this, Pat? Okay, so we're gonna check off where the buyer's agent. That's typically what's in the circumstance we're describing right now. You're
are
gonna be
you
the
two
buyer.
S's or one S?
On my name too.
And then the next set of, and then Patty's going to check buyer's agent. And the next thing says that you're getting the information supplied by, and that would be the listing agent. And in this case, it's
It's Caldwell.
Caldwell Banker, and they would be checked off as seller's agent. They represent the seller. Then the next is, underneath that is the broker information and commission. So you put in, this is easy, the name of the company, the name of the
Yeah,
agent,
we don't need to fill that in.
their
right there, guys.
license numbers that you can get in the MLS, in the roster. Then when it gets down to the commission for the listing broker says commission do, what does that say?
That's for a listing.
For listing agreement.
Yeah. And when I sell something, and I think some people do this, is I never really put the commission, I just put per listing agreement. Because I don't know, I just
We
don't,
don't put 2.5% or whatever
or
the fee is.
2% or whatever it is, because I just feel like, I don't know.
And you
that-
do that down
Seller
here
needs-
also?
Yep,
Yes.
I just put per listing agreement.
We
Do
do
you
a
have a,
lot
do
of,
you have a question, Lisa? You look like you're talking, but you're muted.
That's usually standard, right? So whatever would be on the agreement.
Whatever's on the
MLS.
it's
listing is
right
what
on,
you
it's
get.
right on the
Okay.
bottom of the MLS sheet, Lisa.
Okay.
So
Right, where it says 2.5.
And mine
Right.
is 200 or whatever it
Yeah,
is.
you put in there.
Okay.
so-
Now, occasionally to make a deal, you might, and you know you're competing and it's a very tight thing, you might say, even though the listing says 2.5, I might take 2%. Then you would obviously put it in, but normally you're gonna take what the listing's giving out.
And that's part of your negotiation, guys, but it went right out of my head what I was gonna say. to you. We put in per listing on the bottom where Patty has it right now with the blue highlighted, because in our case, Caroline and I do a lot of referred business and past customers and so forth. And so we don't want to throw in their face and make it easy, like anybody can multiply 2.5 times the $500,000 contract and they can see what the money is. But we probably just aesthetically don't like to fill that in there because we don't want people right away to go to the dollar amount in their head. Oh, yeah, I'm a friend of Caroline's and she's going to be charging, she's going to be making $12,000. Like, well, you know, why throw that right in there, 2.5%, even though it's pretty common knowledge around in leisure world, what realtors get, but we just leave it in there just because it looks cleaner, neater.
The next thing to fill out is the buyer or seller have a real estate license? That's easy. Obviously, you're gonna ask them that. They do not. If they do, then you need to put that in.
Yeah.
Professional referrals, brokers to receive closing. I mean, these are all
These are
standard. This talks about the attorney review that we spoke about in the beginning.
It's 3 business days, guys, but almost never is 3
It
business
could happen in
days.
one.
Yeah, it can happen in one, but that's only if you're
Have a good attorney.
have a good attorney and you push it for your buyer, and it can get done quickly.
And
So
we have very good, Keller Williams, we have a very good approved attorney list. So you want to use some of those people, because the one thing you would try to discourage is if your buyer says, oh, I have an uncle who's an attorney. It's like, oh God.
Yeah, God help
real
me.
estate? You know, do they do real estate? Because I'm dealing with somebody now who was a tax attorney and it took us 3 weeks to get out of attorney review. So because they don't understand the way things work. So just ask them, do you have a real estate attorney, or would you like me to give you a few names of people who do this all the time? On
The
the
addenda?
addendum, you would check lead-based paint right there. And then if they have a house to sell, obviously that's a whole nother, if it's a short sale, if there's a seller's concession, which we probably don't have time to get into all those
Yeah.
things. Unless anybody has questions. I know Danielle, wherever you are, had asked about, you know, a
Yeah,
cash deal, and, you know, sometimes people will waive the mortgage, even though they're getting a mortgage, and write it up as a cash deal to compete. In order to do that, you need to be able to show proof of funds that if you didn't get the mortgage for some reason, you have the cash to back you up. So just so if that, does that explain it, Danny? Does that make sense?
That was for the, which one? That was for the buyers.
I'm saying if you're competing with 5 other offers, sometimes people would like to go with the cash deal because it's not
Yeah.
subject to the
Yeah, it's
mortgage.
not contingent on a mortgage.
Right. So if you have cash, no problem. But most people, I have one I just wrote and she's going for a mortgage, but she has enough money down and has enough financial security that she said, I'm willing to waive the mortgage. So we wrote it as
The
a
mortgage
cash-
contingency.
Yes, but we wrote it as a cash deal, but I informed the listing broker, we will have an appraisal and she is getting a mortgage, but we're representing it as a cash deal. And we have to show proof of funds that
So
she can come up with the money if she didn't get the mortgage. But that's, you have to have a pretty savvy buyer who's willing to
Yeah.
put
Right.
themselves out there for that. You know what I mean? You'll know, if you'll know, not most people are not going to be comfortable with that, because if you don't get the mortgage, you're going to lose your deposit.
Yep.
Because
Yep,
you
you're
have to
gonna
perform.
have to open your wallet.
For everybody that's kind of newer, you probably need to talk to somebody that's experienced that can walk you through that if you think that's an option your buyer wants to do to
Yeah.
secure the property.
Like if your buyer says, well, I'll just waive the mortgage. Well, just make sure you understand that or have them talk to somebody so they understand the ramifications of that.
And you need to talk to their mortgage rep also to make sure it's good.
Solid.
Yep,
Yeah.
solid.
Yeah,
But
there's
these
a lot of,
addendums are in command.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and I think there we go, save and close.
Okay.
Patty, just go up to this blank spot here where you wrote in the inspection thing. If
Yeah.
you guys have other conditions that are, what can I think of here? Like if there's a swimming pool, if you want to have the swimming pool stay open until it's the cold weather now. Most pools are probably closed almost now, but let's say it was mid-September and you wanted to have a pool inspection if you're the buyer, and they said, well, keep the swimming pool open until my inspector gets there. You might write that in there.
Right.
What else, Carolyn? Can you
Or
think
if,
of any other?
if most people don't want a contingency, but when I write an offer for somebody has a contingency, I might say contingent on the buyer closing on their current property. It's under contract, the 10% is in, the inspections are done, scheduled to close such and such a date. So anything you want to put in there, or you might put, even though you put a date for the closing over there, you might say purchaser is totally flexible and will close at the seller's convenience. So any kind of things you might want to add in there, extra things that you don't already cover in the contract, is a good thing to do there.
If you do that, guys, that's again part of strategy. And if you write those things in there, rather than just email this to the other agent, I would email it and then talk to the other agent verbally, not even in a text or email it, and say, hey, Susan, now look at the end of the contract here. I purposely wrote in, we want to keep the swimming pool open, but my buyer, Carol Lee, wants the the closing can be totally flexible. She could close sooner or later, and we'll meet any kind of closing date the person wants.
I was
So you
wondering.
can explain that in there, but I don't think you should leave that for them to read it. You should tell them that it's in there so they make sure they know about it. Okay, because it's buried on the last page. Somebody might not see that.
Somebody have a question?
Ask away, guys.
Yeah, anything that I can go
It's a lot of
over
paper,
again?
it's a lot of lines
So
to the read.
After you prepare all of this, you're going to send it to the listing agent. But as Randy said, I got an offer yesterday from an agent, no phone call, nothing. Fortunately, obviously, I look at my email and I saw it, but you want to call an agent and say, look, I'm sending you over a really good offer or whatever. I have great people. You want to build a little rapport and tell them about your people. I have great people. They're a young couple. I've known them for years, whatever. They have good money down. They're flexible clothes. Even though that's all written down, you want to call them and prepare them. Also, in case they have an offer that they're about to accept, you want to let them know, wait, I'm sending you an offer. You don't want to just email it. And then what if you email it at, like this person emailed it to me like 6 o'clock at night. Now I will look at my email, but I might not have looked at it. And the next day I might have accepted another offer without even realizing. I would still have to present it, but I'm saying you want to have some rapport. So, and you should email it to them in an orderly fashion with a cover letter saying attached is my offer. It includes the contract, the buyer's pre-approval, and any other documentation that you need for them. So just
do you include a signed seller disclosure and lead disclosure when you submit the offer?
Yes, on the MLS, there's a lead paint disclosure and sellers. If you can get your buy, I mean, I don't always, it depends on, sometimes they're not there, but you can put those in DocuSign and send it to your buyers to attach to the contract. So contract, lead paint, seller's disclosure, pre-approval, and on a cover email, just say attached, you'll find this, and that, and in that cover letter, you can repeat what you already told them. My buyer's very flexible at closing. They're very strong. I've spoken to their lender, anything that you can to sell the deal to the other broker.
We're in a sales job, so that's part of your sales pitch to the other realtor. You have to sell the other realtor who then you're hoping will sell their owner on your particular deal, especially if you're competing with other parties. So it's all about the strategy. I know we talked about all the lines and filling in the paperwork, but it's a lot of strategy to getting it right and representing your buyer. Like Carol said, just last night, she got an offer. The other agent never called. Now, is that a good representation of their case for the buyer? They just emailed it with no call, no, hey, we can meet your closing date. Hey, maybe we can negotiate the appliances or something, or explaining to Carol Lee what the good points of their deal is.
And as a listing agent,
that's a bad representation of their buyer.
It doesn't really instill a lot of confidence that this person is being professional and, you know.
And
working-
hands-on.
Yeah, exactly.
And
It makes
hands-on.
me Like, why
Yeah.
are you just emailing it to me without
Yeah.
giving me a heads up? Hey, I just want to let you know, you're going to get an email from me in a few minutes with an offer of pre-approval. And also it gives
Yeah,
you. a
signed by my buyer, signed by the
establish a
buyer.
relationship with the broker a little bit, because, you know, if somebody calls me and says, even if they say, you know, I'm new in the business, but I have these great people and they're going to buy, you know, you want to help them. You know, you want to have some relationship with the realtor, even though some realtors can be a little curt and not nice, not Keller off, but I'm saying some agents can be, but just, you have to, like, you don't want to be fighting with them because you're going to need them. So the nicest thing I ever hear from other agents is, I have multiple offers, but I'd really love to work with you because I know you know what you're doing and you'll get it done. So
Yeah.
that's my point. You want people to want to work with you. So be nice to them. I wouldn't suggest that you call and say, we're making an offer, but you know, the house needs this and it needs that, and this is wrong and that is wrong. Like they're trying to make it, you're trying to make a case for your buyer to get it for a cheaper price. But in the end, you're really insulting the seller. So now you know, you could do it in a nice way. You could say they're coming in with this offer because it does need some updating, but they love the house, and you know what I'm saying?
Love the
Try to-
neighborhood, right, yeah.
Try to
yeah.
make build some relationship with the other realtors so that they even want to work with you.
Yeah.
You know, there's some realtors, to be perfectly honest, that you're like, "Ooh,
They're
I wish
not-
I didn't have to work
they're
with them
not real-
because they're not real
real.
pleasant."
Yeah,
So,
and this is the form you're going to use in New Jersey. And you submit it to the buyer, they sign it. Once it's buyer signed, you submit it to the listing agent. Negotiations start going back and forth. I advise you to keep notes because you're going to have to go in and revise the contract according to the progress of the negotiations and have the buyer re-sign it. All right, with any changes in price or conditions, closing dates or whatever. But this is the form here in New Jersey. This is what we use.
and to Patty's point, generally the back and forth, like, so that's our offer. We present it in a logical form to the listing agent. Generally speaking, they used to actually have the seller sign their counter offer, but now the listing agent would call you back and say, I presented your offer. They like everything about it except the date and the price. So we want a closing date such and such, and we'd like a price of, let's say in this case, they counter with 5 1/4. Well, that might not be the end. So your people are at 5, they're at 5 1/4. You know, you talk to the agent and I would say, oh gosh, I don't know if my people will come up that high. And then the other agent might say to me, well, I don't know if that's their bottom line, which gives me a hint that we still have more room. So the more conversations you have with the listing agent, the more information you can glean about the motivation of the seller, maybe the flexibility in their price and their closing. And then you would go back to they don't put that in writing, they do that verbally. And then you would go back to your buyer and say the seller countered with a closing date of November 10th and a price of 5 1/4. And they go, oh, I'm not doing that. And then you go, well, give me another offer. Let's go back and see if we can't meet in the middle. And then they
Just
might-
keep notes, just
they
keep
might come to
notes.
515. So this is all verbal. And then once we come to a price that everybody agrees, then you change your contract, have your buyer re-sign, send it to the seller, they sign, and then it goes to attorney review.
Guys, a big thing, we were talking strategy on this, and the Carol Lee gave you all those hints about strategy, but when you're negotiating with the other realtor, you want to get along with that person, even though they may not be your cup of tea exactly, but you want to be nice and pleasant and professional, just like you never want your buyer to be angry with the seller or the seller to be angry with your buyer, because even though if you come in low, the buyer gets really upset, you have to be very careful, because when the buyer and seller start not liking each other, and you as a realtor start not liking each other, it's a lot of headbutting, no progress can be made. And if the sellers don't like the buyer and the buyers like the seller, they may not all of a sudden like the closing date so much. They may not be so willing to sell the house at that price. They may figure, well, the hell with them. I'll just wait a couple more weeks. We're having a lot of activity. And so you want to be on a good standing with the other realtor and have the homeowner and the buyer at least not be angry. You don't want to tell the other realtor, oh, Patty, my people hate those people because they came in so low, where they came in
And it
with such a
happens.
weak case. That's so ridiculous. I already turned down 600 last week and they're offering 525. So you don't want them to get angry with each other.
And you should
very
tell
hard to
your,
overcome.
that's one of the reasons you ask, have you had any offers that they turned down? And sometimes the realtor will say, well, they turned down 5 1/4. Now you have a 500 on your pad here. And so then you might go back, and the buyer, if they still want to present it, you present it. But I would maybe go back to my buyer and say, look, I had a nice conversation with the realtor. And they did turn 5 1/4 down last week. So maybe we want to start a little bit higher, not to insult them and to engage them in a conversation so they counter to us. Now, if the buyer says, no, I still want to do 5, then you do 5. I mean, it's their decision, but you're giving them valuable information that they've already turned that down. But I do say to a seller, somebody, I just heard this recently, you learn from everybody. A realtor said, I said, you think your people will be insulted if we offer this? And she said, I tell my sellers, every offer is a compliment. And that's a very good way to say it because, and I did, and
It
the
was
other,
a low offer, guys.
it was a low offer. And then I've said this to my sellers where they're like, I can't believe they made that offer. And I go, well, at least they made an offer. The other 20 people who saw your house didn't. So, don't be pissed off at the people who made the offer. At least you got an offer.
And if you, in the reverse, if you represent the owner or the owner says, I'm not even making a counter offer to you, that your buyer can get very angry. What do you mean you're not gonna make a counter offer? So you don't want them to get mad at the seller. And when you do get a counter offer or they don't, you don't want the buyer to get mad at the seller and the seller to get mad at the buyer because it just makes your negotiation from the start impossible. And then when you come to, if you get the contract signed eventually, when home inspection issues come up and they already don't like each other, it really becomes a contentious situation. And deals fall through, like Carolee said, usually because of home inspection issues that you can't resolve. And sometimes there are issues that are no brainers that should not fall through for that reason.
And even if the offer is low, I don't mean if it's ridiculous, but if it's a little on the low side, I try to encourage my sellers to make a counter. I said, you have nothing to lose. Make a counter. Let's engage them in a conversation. Let's see where they go. If they only come up 5,000, then we walk away. But if they show that they're willing to do some negotiating, then maybe there's a chance we could put it together. And like Randy said, you want the buyer and seller to not dislike each other. So if you try to tell, like, a seller makes an offer and they go, well, it's ridiculous. The house needs work and it's this and it's been on the market. I would always say, well, look, the sellers have lived there for 30 years. This is their home. They love it. Like, try to make them empathize with the fact that the sellers are not just being hard asses and greedy. They love their home, and to them, they think it's worth. So you're always trying to make them like each other and understand each other, because it makes for a much nicer transaction if they don't despise one another.
It's our job to keep the emotions, that anxiety at bay.
Right. And if you can make,
Very hard to do. So.
if you can make each party put themselves in the other people's shoes, like to the seller, you might say, look, they're a young couple. They're not insulting you. It's just what they can afford. But you know what I'm saying? You can make it a smoother transaction if you can try to build some rapport.
Is that helpful?
All
guys?
great advice, guys. You have no idea how lucky you are to have people of this caliber taking the time from 6 to like 7:15 at night to help you.
Does anybody have questions about either the technical part of it or anything like that?
Strategy, guys.
Yes, I have a
had-
question. Okay,
I have-
yeah, you go first. Go ahead, Susan.
Okay, so when we're talking about negotiation, when we put an offer, most of the time when I do the offer, they will not get back to me saying, oh, they only say it's rejected. They don't come back and saying that we have an offer
Good point.
a little bit higher. I mean, you wanna maybe talk to your client and go more up. They never negotiate, so, and I never
Randy.
hear from them at all, so I
Would
feel
the
challenging.
initial offer?
Could I speak to that? Could I
Go
just
ahead.
speak to that? And then I'm going to hand it over to you. Number one, it's your job as the buyer's agent to say, when can I hear back? And by the way, am I going to have a chance? Is my buyer going to have a chance to negotiate? Or is this final and best? That's your job as a buyer's agent. Okay, that's part of that conversation that Carolee was telling you to have right in the beginning. Hey, I'm coming in with an offer. Let me tell you, how are you going to handle the negotiations? And when can we hear back? Randy and Carolee?
Susan,
Thank
are you
you.
talking about when there's other offers, or are you talking about, you're talking about when there's multiple offers?
Mostly there is multiple offer, yeah.
Oh, well, then the sellers don't generally counter to multiple offers. They generally, your question to the agent is your seller gonna do final and best? In other words, if
And
there's a
when-
bunch
when-
of
when-
offers,
When would that be? Would it be tomorrow at 5 o'clock or Thursday
Yeah.
at 10 o'clock or something like that? So if you, especially if you're, even if you're full price and there's multiple offers, meaning maybe a lot of people went over the price, they're not going to throw you a counter proposal. So you should prepare your people for that. And when you find out it's highest and best, you need to report back to your buyer that, gee, we're in a multiple situation, Carolee, I don't know what to do. And here's what I think you should do. And we're going to make our best offer if you think it's affordable. And if you like it that much, we offered 500, but maybe I'm getting the vibe from the other realtor. She has 5 very strong offers, and maybe we should offer 525 or whatever the if you're lucky enough to have comparables in the neighborhood,
And-
whatever they want to offer, and see how you do. But Carol is exactly 100% right. They're not going to give you a counter in a multiple offer situation. If you're the only game in town, they're pretty much going to give you
they
a
should
counter.
give you a counter, but if there's multiple offers, what you can, look, you can ask anything you want. It doesn't mean they're gonna tell you, but if you're nice and you have a relationship, you could say to the listing agent, can you just tell me if you already have full price? Because sometimes the agents will say, yep, I have several full price offers. And I can tell you that if the house is out for 3 or 4 days on the market and they have 3 or 4 offers, you know that house is going over the price. So, but you can, in a nice way, say, oh, do you already have, oh, I guess you already have full price. And they'll usually say, yep. I mean, I've had people, they're not really supposed to tell you, but if you ask the right way and nicely,
Or you can hear in their voice,
Yeah.
Susan, that you kind of get an indication of what the vibe is about maybe what the other offers are, and kind of try to read between the lines. Like Carol said, if the house just came out this afternoon and there's 5 offers by 7 o'clock tonight, you know it's
You know
going
it's
over
going
the price,
over.
even if it's on 3 or 4 days. If it's on for 60 days and you're the only offer in town, they're probably going to at least think about it, unless you're coming really low. If they're insulted, or if they think they're insulted and they come in
Right.
really low, there may not be a counter offer there either. But usually if you're realistic and they're realistic, their agent can get them to counter if it's been on the market for a while. And there are some houses right now that are on the market because they're overpriced. So the hot houses sell quickly and the overpriced ones are sitting. So that's another issue that we could go over sometime when you have a listing that's overpriced.
but I have said to agents, I guess you already have full price and do you have cash? And they'll sometimes say yes. And then you know that they already have a full price offer and it's cash. So to beat that, you're either gonna have to go over or you're gonna have to go cash if you can do that. So, if not all will tell you, but some people say, I can't tell you that. And I'll go, okay,
It's all
You know,
how
you-
you say it, kind of guys.
yeah, you gotta ask in a nice way.
So I have a scenario
Yeah.
happened to me this weekend. There's a condo I'm looking to. I called Saturday. He told me he's getting out the contract tomorrow, under attorney review. You have to put your offer tonight.
Tonight?
And I
tonight?
told him,
Saturday.
tonight meaning Saturday.
Oh, okay.
Sunday morning has to go under attorney review. So I said to him, can I know, is it like you're getting the asking price? He told me, I cannot tell you anymore. I just told you if you have, put it now. So I I turned off. I feel myself, I turned off and I didn't put the offer.
Yeah, but you know what?
They're not obligated,
No.
Susan, to tell you anything, actually. Carolie's telling you some language that she might use and that I would use to have a conversation with the other realtor. And believe it or not, sometimes they'll blurt out things that their broker or manager would probably tell them you shouldn't really say. So remember, this is a sales strategy.
You know
And
what?
it's
I
also a competition, just like sports. So if you say something to the other realtor, kind of leading them with leading questions, and they say something that maybe they shouldn't have said to you, I don't mean anything illegal, but I mean, maybe they blurted out, oh, we have 5 offers way over the price. Now, way over, what does that mean? Does it mean 5,000, 10,000? At least it gives you an idea of versus they say nothing. So it's all on how you kind of present yourself as a professional to that person and kind of give them a couple leading questions like Carolee just threw out to you
like
guys.
you might have said to her, just as an example, and it might not work anyway, but you might have said to her, I'm not sure if my buyers are willing to go full price. Am I wasting my time? And she might say yes. So if she says yes, then she's already got full price. You know what I'm saying? Nobody's really volunteering the information. You're kind of I don't want to say tricking them into it, but if you ask in a way like, I don't want to waste your time, my time, and anybody's time, my buyers probably won't pay full price. Am I wasting my time writing it up? And they'll say, yeah, don't bother. Now, if they say don't bother, then you go back to your buyer and say, look, if you really want this house, it's going into attorney review. They have at least full price. Make your absolute best offer that you're comfortable making, and we'll give it one shot. We'll only get one shot at it because it's already in attorney review. And if it's 600 and your people say, okay, I'll go 610, then you quickly write it up and you submit it to them with the best terms you can, and you might have a chance to knock out the first deal.
Does that
If
help
they
there,
are-
Susan?
Sorry, if they are under attorney review, can I just submit it or no more?
You can up until attorney review is over. It doesn't mean, once the attorneys connect with each other, they might have a relationship, they might not throw them over, but if it's for enough money, they will. If yours is that much better than the first contract, they'll do one of two things. They'll go back to the first people and say, we got a better offer, will you match it, and stick with them? Or they may say, well, this is a much better offer, we're gonna go with it. They're legally can do that. The buyer can back out during the 3 days, and the seller can accept the better offer. And you should warn your buyers about that when they're all excited. Oh, we got the house, we got the house. And say, okay, but just remember that we have to get in and out of attorney review, because during that period, they are entitled to take another offer.
That's why I said earlier, an hour ago, guys, when Sandra was on the line, I don't know if she still is, I don't see her name, that she already has a contract that was just signed. She wants to now make sure that she gets in review tomorrow and out of review as quickly as possible, because somebody that got burned and they just found out tonight that they didn't get the house, disappointed tomorrow, they sleep on it.
Well,
They decide, well, we losing that house, honey, let's go another 20 grand because.
just like your people, Susan, now they want to make an offer, even though they know there's an offer accepted. They thought about it and like, oh, darn, we should have went higher. So they still have a chance to do that. And the person who got the house needs to understand that, because you don't want your people all excited and you don't warn them about this 3-day period. And then they get a higher offer and they bounce you out. Then your people are going to be mad at you. Like, what? I thought you told us we had the house. So just make sure that they understand that could happen. So you want to get your attorney very quickly to do a rider and get in and out of attorney review before we lose the house. I would warn them of that so they get that there's a risk, because we've seen people like agents that then the buyers are annoyed. They don't understand. Well, I don't understand. You told me I had it. Now I don't have it anymore. So, and
Yeah,
they
that's a
get
tough
and they get
conversation, guys.
mad. So you want to make sure you explain the possibility up front.
Because if they know that, Susan, up front, and then somebody, you get a call from the listing realtor saying, Susan, I know you had the deal yesterday, but somebody else just offered $15,000 more. I'm really sorry to make this call to you. Now, if you already told your people a day before that this possibly could happen, when you call them, that's a hard phone call to make, and tell them, hey, guys, we had the house yesterday, but somebody just offered 15 grand more, and they're going to give us the opportunity to match it. But what do you think? And if you already told them that might happen, that softens the blow a lot. Now, they will not like it, and you will feel uncomfortable saying it. But if you already soften the blow that these things could happen, and if and when it does, it's uncomfortable, but it can help you save a deal by already setting the stage for what the hoops come up that they may have to jump through to make the deal happen. And it's a lot of money often, but sometimes they'll give you the
And
opportunity.
if a
to match the other
realtor
one.
calls you and says that, like, oh, we accepted your offer, but I'm sorry, we just got an offer for more money. And I'm saying the person, Susan, that you're trying to knock out, if that agent's a good agent, she's going to say to the listing agent, look, my people are going to be so disappointed. Can you give us an opportunity to match the offer? So, but she might not, people are like, oh God, that's it, my deal's set. You always have to fight to the end for these deals.
That's why you want to have the realtor like you and have your buyer not get angry with the seller and your seller not get angry with you, because you want them in that situation, which comes up, to make sure they come back to Susan and say, look, you were first in the door. We did accept your offer last night. I know it's only 10 hours ago, but because I like you, we're going to give you a shot to match it. We'll give you till 5 o'clock tonight or tomorrow. If they don't really like you, and they're arguing already, the buyer and seller and the realtor and you are grinding each other because you're arguing about, oh, there's too much wallpaper in the house and the chimney looks a mess already. So they may not come back to you and nicely say, can you match it? Does that make sense? You
So
wanna stay on good
Susan,
terms
when
with
you,
it.
when
Yes,
you
thank you.
so when he wouldn't give you the information, you might be mad inside, but you can't get mad. You have to just say that, okay, I'm gonna go back to my buyer and get the best offer they're willing to make. And that's all. You know what I'm saying? You sometimes you want to say like, why aren't you telling me this? But you know, you have to maintain that good relationship.
Yeah, I wasn't mad, but
No,
his response to me like shut me off.
Yeah.
So that's mean don't go further. And it seems to be he has something who was really interested with. So I felt I don't want to waste my time and my buyer time and I know he will turn me off.
Well,
So
you know what? I sold a house once, and I don't want to get into this, is a long story, but I got a call from somebody who said, I want this house. It was a certain house. And I called the realtor, and the realtor said, oh, we already have an accepted contract. And I said, but is it out of attorney review? She said, no. I called the buyer back and I said, look, they already have an accepted contract. She really discouraged me from making an offer. And I said to the buyer, but if you really want it, let's do it. So we wrote the offer. She wanted this house come hell or high water. She paid 140 something thousand over the asking price. Yeah, this was back in 2005
Long time ago.
when the market was crazy. It was ridiculous. She way overpaid. But the point was, she said, somebody referred me
There was
to
another
you.
person that's way overpaying too.
Yeah. So she goes, somebody referred me to you and they said, you'll fight for this house and you'll get it for me. I want this house. So I said, okay, let's write the contract. We wrote the contract. We submitted. It was way better than the first offer. The attorney told the first people what our offer was, and they came up. He really shouldn't have done that. But my girl wouldn't give up. She goes, I want it. I go, well, I guess you're going to have to come high. Anyway, they finally did highest and best. And basically the realtor said, don't bother. We have a great deal. But I did go that step because she was so adamant about it. And they finally did highest and best, no inspections, pool as is, like it was ridiculous. I told her, you're never selling this house for this money. I don't care. It reminds me of my grandmother's house.
They still live there. It's 15 or
She's
more
still
years
there.
ago.
The kitchen was like old. It was ridiculous how, and then she went up like another 50,000. And then I said, highest and best is by tomorrow. And I said, sleep on it because you're really, I think you're letting your emotions run away with you. Just sleep on it. She called me the next day and she said, yeah, I thought about it. I thought she was going to lower it. She raised her offer another like 30,000. It was ridiculous. So I was afraid the attorney would use it against us. So it was highest and best by 5 o'clock. So I didn't tell them what my offer was. They kept calling to say, do you have it? I didn't. I waited till 4:45 in the parking lot of the attorney's office. And I called them and I said, did you get the other offer? And they said, yes, we're just waiting for yours. I said, oh, okay, I'm on my way. And I went into his office and I said, can you please open them both while I'm standing here so I know? And he did, and we got it. But I'm saying sometimes you really have to fight for these deals. So don't be discouraged. I mean, it depends how much you buy. Or this girl, like she was crying that she wanted this house. So, you know, when you have a buyer that's that motivated, you go the extra mile, and she certainly did. And I told her, don't call me in 2 years when you want to sell it because you ain't getting that money again. But, you know, but the point was that, you know, if I listened to the realtor, I really basically called her and said, you know what? She said, it's a really great deal. It's gone. And she didn't care. She wanted that house come hell or high water. So I'm just saying, don't give up too soon.
She didn't call the other broker and attack them and say, who's the attorney, and force it down their throat and be really belligerent about presenting her offer. Like, you gotta let me do this. You gotta let me do this. Who's the attorney? She was more kind and friendly, and
actually,
hey, Randy, I really have to submit this offer because it's just,
that's exactly what
it's still
I
an attorney. I'm obligated by law to submit the offer, which is true. And so she took more of that tactic than call and pound it down the throat of the other realtor, which would turn the other realtor off, and the other realtor could say, okay, goodbye, hanging up on you. And that would be it. So it would be never a chance to win the transaction for that buyer.
What I said to the realtor was, look, I hate to interfere with a good deal that you have, but my buyer is adamant about me presenting this offer. So I have to present it. And then when I presented it, it was higher, so she had to present it. So I'm saying, you know, you always want to be, you know, nice to the realtors, even when they're
though it's
annoying, even when they want to annoy you. But I'm just saying, I'm telling you that story just because don't take no for an answer always right away. You know, like they say in sales, how many, Patty? You get 10 no's before you get a yes. So, you know, don't, like, if the realtor is like, oh, don't bother, we have a deal, whatever. Just, if your buyer wants it, it's your responsibility to do whatever you can to try to get it for them. Now, you can only do as good as they're willing to do. This girl happened to be willing to jump through hoops, and, you know, so it was, but
Not to beat a dead horse on that, guys, but you always get more with honey than, what did I say, with vinegar.
Yep.
So
With vinegar.
we're in sales. So even if you're that other realtor's you're not inviting her over, him or her over for Thanksgiving because you don't really care for them. Be nice to them. It's going to win you transactions. And when transactions have $8, $10, $12, $15,000 commission, it's a lot of money. So you can suck up your pride a little bit and be nice to these people, even if they're not your cup of tea. You don't have to be best friends with them, but you have to get along professionally in a nice, kind way, and that'll make you a lot of extra money.
because you'll see that there's a lot of big brokers that do a lot of listing. So there's a good chance you might come across that person again the next go around, and you don't want them to be like, oh, that was the B that I worked with before and I'm not dealing with her again. So even if you hang up the phone and go, what a jerk that guy is, just be nice and be pleasant, because you're going to need them at some point.
That helpful, guys? I hope we got all that.
I think Lisa had a question.
I can't hear you.
You're
Lisa.
No,
muted.
actually, you covered that scenario, because I have like a kind of similar scenario where somebody went 50,000 over asking. And then we kind of went back and forth again, you know, because the people were very attached to the house. But then what happened is they asked them to waive the appraisal, and then it got, you know, we got into murky water. You know, but throughout the whole thing, my goal was making my buyer happy. And like you said, it's a dance. The lawyer actually for the seller was like, wow, he was a tough man.
Did you get the property or not?
Unfortunately, what happened was during Ida, their business went under. So it kind of turned the tides on everything.
And
But you know what,
waiving an
it's-
appraisal, by the way, is something that,
It's
you know,
scary.
it's hard for people to swallow. But what you could do, which might help you, is you might waive the appraisal by a dollar amount. In other words, say the house is selling for 700,000, or the mortgage amount, let's say the mortgage amount is 700,000, and
Right.
people, they could waive $20,000 of the appraisal. But in order to do that, you have to have the extra 20 to put down.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
these
he
are
did,
very
and he
hard
did.
concepts
He
to
was
explain to
approved, he
people,
was
right?
approved for 150,000, you know, so in other words, he was pre-approved for 6, the house listed at 488. He put
Oh.
in an offer at 538. So it was fine, but then he had a brother in another state that got a license. So he kind of, you know, put the kibosh on what was going on too. So, but I mean, look, it's an experience,
It is.
you know.
Yeah, no,
I kept my relationship with the buyer, and, you know, we're still looking, you know, they recouped their business and they got some help from FEMA, you know, so we've been able to maintain our relationship, and now we're out looking again.
well, that's good. And that's because, and the more you prepare them for like the home inspection, you might not get everything you want, and you're not, you know, the house is really as is, and prepare them that in that 3-day attorney review, you could lose the house. The more you prepare them, then nothing's a shock and they can't blame you. You know, when things go wrong, people have a tendency to want to blame
True.
somebody, and it's usually the realtor. So
That's
you
true.
want to do everything you can to just cover all your bases.
And
So
make
they
sure-
can't
Make sure
say.
they understand why
Thank
you're
you.
doing it a certain way to try to help them secure the
Right.
property. And if they don't get it, at least they gave it, and you gave it their best shot on their behalf, so they don't get angry with you. Now, if they lose a lot of properties, which sometimes is happening, they do get disappointed, and like Carolee said, it's always the realtor's fault. But you can avoid that by doing what Carolie's saying, Lisa, is set the stage of what to expect and not to expect, what can happen,
Right.
what might not
And
happen.
I did, you know, when the offer was accepted, I said to them, please understand that even though it's accepted, it doesn't mean, you know, that,
It's fine.
you know, it's final, right? Anything can happen. We're just very hopeful. We're just one step closer.
That's it. Well, and so when things didn't work out, it's not like they could come back and say, well, why didn't you tell us that? So that's what I'm
Right.
saying. Just the more you prepare and explain and educate them, the better they'll appreciate you. And they'll also won't feel like you kept anything from them. Even
Right,
if you
right.
did that inadvertently sometimes. And if you're in a multiple offer situation, because we had a young guy here who did this, he, for some reason, had it in his head they were going to get it. And he made them feel that they were going to get it. And then when they didn't, they were very upset, I think, with him. It's not
Yeah.
rightly so, but he was like, oh, that's a really good offer. You know, I think it looks really good. You can't do that. Just tell them you have to make your best shot that you're comfortable with. I always say,
Right.
if you're comfortable with offering 650 and it goes for 670, well, then you don't want to pay that anyway, so we can walk away. And then,
Right.
if they don't get it, it's really on them, not on you.
True. Yeah, true. Because they were calling for highest and best when we went there, you know, when we visited the house already, and they had 5 offers already. So then, you know, I was honest with them. I spoke to the listing agent and, you know, she said, you have to come in with a really strong offer. And she was happy with their offer because that evening, 4 hours later, she accepted it.
Hmm.
So I'm assuming that that was the strongest offer on the table.
How
You
much
know.
over did they go? Like 40 or something?
50. Yeah,
Well, you
Yeah.
did everything you could. I mean,
I did. And I feel okay
and
with
they know
that.
you did.
And they know I did, and I kept my relationship with them, you know, it was a hard pill to swallow, like to lose that. But then at the end of the day, I said, you know what? It's about integrity and it's about doing the right thing by them. So, you know, I felt okay with that.
If you're doing those things, Lisa, you want to get that, have them like and trust you, and obviously they apparently do. They stuck with you. So that's the key to making money in this business and getting referred business later on, is to have them like you, trust you, be confident in you, and then you'll sell them something eventually and you'll get referred business from them. So
Right,
that's the
absolutely.
whole way.
Are
Okay.
there any other questions before we sign off here?
Yeah, thank you. You have gone a half an hour over and
Thank
you
you
give
very
so
much,
much of
everyone.
yourself. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Okay.
All right, guys, we hope that's helpful.
Good luck. If you need any help, we're
Have
here.
fun,
Patty's
selling
here.
it.
Thank you. Thank you, Randy and Carol Lee. Thank you very much.
You're welcome,
You're
Patty.
welcome.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
have a good night, guys.